Oh,
What happened?
I'm glad you're back. Anyway, one lady we met in a place where I used to work in a hospital. So he introduced me to the high school we was going, because when I came, I was in my last year of high school, but there were so many political demonstrations, and the police would go out to kill people, young people, in the street.
Jesus, that's pretty scary. Pretty scary start, you know.
Yeah, that's the number
But
one reason.
what made you come to New York in the first place?
That was the reason, because I was in pursuit of freedom. Growing up in a dictatorship like Rafael Trujillo was very dangerous. Not only that, but after he was killed, Joaquin Balaguer, who was his partner, became president for many years afterwards. So, but when I came
story
here,
is pretty
I didn't know what to, well, the 60s.
How did you learn English? Yeah, you got here in 63, right?
63. And you know, the 60s were very hard in Mexico, in Paris. 1968 was terrible.
Yeah, 68 was really a convoluted, very revolutionary year all over the planet. It was amazing.
Yes.
Even in the United States, with the Kent University, you know, those killings, it was, well, it doesn't seem like much has improved.
Also in the United States, segregation
Talking of
ended in
dictators.
1964.
It doesn't look very hopeful. But I'm staring at this painting of these two legs in profile, stocking legs in black stockings against a red background, which seems to almost like a door to some place.
Well,
like he's walking into some place.
I read the book Biografía de un cimarrón by Miguel Barnett, and also the red. He said, atrapado en punzó. En Argentina usan re a punzó also. So in the book he said to catch the Africans and getting a slave, they would shake a red handkerchief and they would come trying to get a handkerchief, the red thing, and they would catch them and turn them into slaves.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it says in your bio that you started with figuration, I mean, yeah, one could call this figurative, but not necessarily. It's much more than that. It seems to be more symbolic than figurative. It seems to be carrying a lot of background, just like you explained right now in the book.
Yes.
And so, but behind it is another, what is it that I'm looking at that's behind it? Seems like some gray and black and gray background.
No, it's a gold painting behind me.
It's another painting behind it.
Yes, and it's about the history of gold, because the history of gold is so old.
The history of what?
Gold.
Of gold, yeah.
Yeah, it's so old, and also has so much history. It's in everything in society, from the beginning to today.
Yeah. I mean, gold, and from gold to oil.
Well, actually, oil can be used for you to wear oil. But gold, people had it in architecture, they had personal things. Today, most people have it in their mouth. And also is using architecture, was used today, still using architecture. It's using the phones today in technology, in medicine, and also one of the things that I wanted to let people know is gold doesn't corrupt, but it corrupts people.
Yeah, but gold in the hands of the wrong,
Yes,
I mean, definitely could corrupt, I mean, people.
yes.
And, well, I mean, on the topic of corruption, we could be talking hours, you know. I mean, I'm currently living in Mexico, and, well, I don't want to expand on it, but it is a very sad situation in terms of the devastating effects of corruption on people, mostly of indigenous backgrounds.
Yes. Also, in the Dominican Republic, the militaries are very corrupt.
In Mexico, everybody's corrupt and everybody's in collusion. The military, the corporations, the government.
Yes.
And the oil was so-called nationalized, and then it was sold off again. So anyway, the gold diggers of the world are digging gold that's of another type these days.
No,
I mean,
when the European first came to America, they kept on looking for gold everywhere. And you see what they did to Atahualpa? It was crazy. And not only that, no matter how they got the gold from, they would take it to Europe and they would melt it. They didn't care what it was about. They just melted.
yeah, there's this wonderful book by Octavio Paz. I forget
Right.
the title of it, but it is about the development of the ideas of progress and industrialization, and which Northern Europe was definitely the one that initiated all of that. And it came as a result of pirating the ships that came from the Spanish and others in the Caribbean and dragging them home. And with that gold, they actually industrialized the North.
Also, the Nazis,
Instead of,
they
some of
so-called
it
human
landed in Spain, and it became part of the religious architecture and so forth. But Spain didn't use the money, it didn't use the gold as an exchange to modernize their nation at that point. So in some instances, gold has been not only the influence and the source of corruption, but the source of progress, which
also,
is hard to believe, because when we talk of modernity and talk of Europe being, one of those spots that is on the forefront, so-called, it depends how you see and how you view today the concepts and idea of modernity. And I was wondering, in terms of your work, do you think your work is more modern or contemporary? What do you think? Where do you think the work belongs?
it includes everything because I'm dealing with history. I had a fellowship in Washington to study, to research gold. And then I had an exhibition in Chile in 2019 about gold. And the other thing about gold is where it comes from. It comes from the universe, from the collision of neutron stars in the universe.
Geology.
Yes.
Yeah.
People didn't know that much about where it came from until about 10 years ago. And
Tell me something. When were you in Chile?
I went there twice in 2019.
That was when you had this fellowship in Washington.
No, the fellowship in Washington was around 2006, maybe. No, 2016.
And from there you went to Chile after that fellowship.
Yeah, I went there to look at the places, and there were very few places to do the exhibition because of the time. So I ended up at the Raleigh Museum, a, a private museum. They have Raleigh in Spain, they have Raleigh in Chile, Raleigh in Uruguay, and Raleigh in Israel. The owner is a Jewish family.
At what museum in Chile? Was that the MAC?
It's called Raleigh.
What?
Raleigh.
Radik?
Raleigh.
R-A what?
Rally.
Raleigh. I've never been to that museum. But I'm surprised you didn't go to Colombia or Peru also for the gold.
No, I really wanted to go to Colombia because Colombia has one of the museums about gold that is most great.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but also one of the things about my art is about freedom, which is the reason I keep on changing. I don't want people, first of all, to tell me what to do. If I sell some kind of style, once I finish with that, I change. I don't care if you sell. The most important thing to me is my freedom. The other thing is I put content into my abstract art, almost all of it, even though I really used to look at all the geometric art, Mondrian, Barnett, Frank Stella. And Frank Stella didn't put any content, even though he changed the style too. He changed a lot, but he said, what you see is what you see. But when you see my work, you have to look at it carefully. Also look at the titles, and you know there is some history behind it. Also, I've been very influenced by Latin American literature. Because
by Latin American what?
Literature, right?
Literature.
I think they're some of the greatest writers in the world.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yes.
Definitely.
The number one, my favorite was Julio Cortázar.
Really?
Yes.
Did you like Hopscotch?
No, I didn't read much.
Hopscotch was a book that was cut in half, and you could read it either way.
Yeah, you mean
Rayuela.
Rayuela. I have paintings named Rayuela, right?
Rayuela. In Spanish, Rayuela. Hopscotch in English.
Right. No, yeah. Actually, I did a book dedicated to Julio Cortázar because he was such an influence in my way of thinking about art. Julio never wanted to repeat himself. All his books were different. And he didn't want to work with the same editorial because they publish in the same format too. And
I met him and spent quite a bit of time with him in Paris back in the 60s. And there were also the Cuban writers were there. There was a lot of people in exile voluntarily, si tu quieres, if you want. But yeah, that was before it sort of everybody's destination became New York, was Paris.
Yes.
This is an interesting painting above, this rombo with that sort of speedway in the middle, or a slice of a chessboard.
Well, actually, it had to do with colonization. Columbus was saying that the earth was round. At the time, not many people, even that always working in the ocean, knew that there were it was a round planet. And the reason why they call us in America Indians is because they were going to India.
Yeah, I know. That's a pretty well-known story, all the mistakes that were made. First by Columbus and second by Americo Vespucci. And consequently we're called America. And so like Juan Downey said, our identity has come from two major mistakes.
And also the painting is titled Penetración del Paraíso. And it's using geometry, meaning that they change everything.
Can I ask you another question about New York?
Yes.
Who were the artists of the Latin American community that you frequented or spoke to or had a relationship with or went studio visiting?
Well, actually, I used to live in the village, and there are some mostly younger people of my generation who mostly there were some people from Argentina, from Cuba. I didn't know.
Do you remember their names or who they were?
No, I don't remember.
Uh-huh.
Because that was about almost 55 years ago.
I know. we're all getting on in age. We could talk about 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever. But going back to that, this whole idea about abstraction and Latin American art and abstraction. Well, first you were associated with the Museum of Contemporary Hispanic Art, which is where I met you.
Yes.
When I was the curator after Susana Lival.
Right.
And I guess that was like in the 80s, somewhere mid 80s. And so then, the sort of identity tag was Hispanic, which everybody felt really uncomfortable with because it was a designation that the Nixon administration decided anybody who spoke Spanish was a Hispanic. And everybody then used affirmative action to self-call themselves whatever they thought they were. Hence came the Chicano nomenclature in California and the Latino. And now, so then you were a Latino. First you were a Hispanic American, then you were a Latino. And now you're a Latinx. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel like Latinx. Also because my background is incredible. I'm part Chinese, part Lebanese, part European, and as a Dominican, they must be part black.
You think so?
Yes, because all the slaves that came to America first went to the Dominican Republic.
I know.
Yeah.
There's some remarkable engravings in Belgium of the early landings there. All based on the narration of Columbus, obviously, and his crew. And one of them was Columbus is standing with one foot on the island and all his armor, and behind him are the troops in the ship, and on the island are the Taínos, and they're all wearing loincloths, and they have hammocks behind them, no houses or anything, and feathers in their hair. And so, the image was certainly relate something that was definitely indigenous, but not Indian necessarily, because that came because of him thinking that he had landed in India.
Right.
I've always wondered what the Indians in India would think if they were being compared with the Indians in Latin America, so-called quote-unquote Indians. I've been in India several times working in Mexican exhibition, but I never dared to ask the question. I guess it was a little premature. It was in the 70s.
Have you seen the video of Octavio Paz and Julio Cortázar in India dancing?
Yeah, I have. I've seen almost everything well, not seen, I've also read almost everything of Octavio and Julio. And also of Carlos Fuentes. And who is the author of Tres Tristes Tigres, otra vez? ¿Cómo se llamaba el cubano? Is the Cuban writer? I forget his name. He was also
Gabriel Infante.
Yeah, Gabriel Infante. He was also there. The other one, which I would have loved to meet, and I don't know what you think of his work, is Alejo Carpentier.
Oh, yes, I read a lot of his work too. Cuban.
It's amazing, no?
Yes.
That text that he wrote about the civilization was brought by the French importing the guillotine to Cuba. I mean, and he said 2 contributions, the guillotine and the toilet.
Yeah.
But the French.
Also, vecino de México was Miguel Ángel Asturias from Guatemala.
From Guatemala, yeah, he's a classic.
Yeah, and I named two paintings by 2 of his books, El Papa Verde and Mulata de Tal.
No me digas.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So above you right now, above us, both of us, is this painting that seems like the world is on fire and there's daggers coming down.
Burning your heart.
What did you have in mind when you painted that?
That was part of the series about Trujillo.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. So were you connected with Dominican exiles in New York?
Not much, but at the beginning, because I know relatives in New York, I stayed with some Dominican families for a while. But once I started to know a little bit about New York, I really wanted to move to the West Village, and that was really, really good.
To the West Village?
Yes.
Why?
Because people were really interested in art. They were also political. They were always demonstrating against the Vietnam War in the 60s, something that I avoided too. I was supposed to go into the army because at the time there was a draft and they drafted me and I left the country because I didn't want to go into the army.
Where did you go?
Back to the Dominican Republic for a little while. Also, one of the people that I admire a lot was Muhammad Ali, the boxer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. He's one of my great heroes. I watched all of his games, and I'm not a great, follower of sports, but he was something else. He was like a brilliant, brilliant man. So, did you actually see him fight? I got to see him.
Not in person, but I saw in the village once in person. And also, I find out recently his father was a painter, and after he retired, he did some paintings that I'm trying to sell now.
Didn't they come up for auction at some point?
They're going to be coming up soon, very soon.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually everything becomes merchandise, huh?
Yes. Oh, did you see the graffiti artist from England? With a shredded painting on paper? Somebody paid like 25 million. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of like totally stunned that I don't know what to make of that new market, the NFTs, the non-fungible token market. You follow that?
Yes, I do read
it's
about
only cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
I mean, I got an invitation from I think PayPal or one of those, that I could also do transactions in cryptocurrency. I mean, do you know anything about that?
No,
Do you think that Isabella would sell your paintings for cryptocurrency?
Actually, people are buying names, not art.
Yeah, well, you're a big name in the realm of the abstract Latinx artists. You're in the book.
I hope so. Because
Well,
actually,
you are.
I was one of the pioneers in the minimalism at the beginning. Did you know that I showed with Carmen Herrera in 1972 at New York University?
No, I did not. What show was that?
It was a Lopez Student Center. It was some Latin American artists. I was the youngest one. And I don't know if she was the oldest because some of the artists that were in the show already died, incluyendo Miguel Ocampo from Argentina.
Yeah. At that point, there were a lot of abstract artists from the southern cone in New York.
Yes. Also,
We all got together under that Museo Latinoamericano and then MICLA, and it was kind of a mix of all sorts of art making. It wasn't about art, it was about activism. So it didn't matter what kind of art you were doing. But it turned out that the majority of those that were, actively engaged were either doing video art or performance or poetry and performance, a combination of installation, what was then called happenings, like Marta Minujín. And but there was an Ecuadorian abstract artist called Luis Molinari. He was actually quite good. Again, on the minimalist end of it. I don't know what has become of his work, but he was very respected at that time. And then there was this other artist who died recently from Argentina. I can't remember his name right now. But I'm sure you must have seen each other's work at that time. Maybe in that show. Who knows?
well, in the 70s and 80s, I used to go to all the galleries, all the museums, all the time. Because at the time, I was a full-time artist. It was easy to survive in New York as an artist because everything was so cheap back then. Today, to have a studio in New York is so expensive. I had lofts in Chelsea. My first loft in Chelsea, 1970.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, because
If I move out of my loft on Houston, the landlords could raise the rent to $10,000 and $15,000.
exactly,
400 square foot. A little shy of.
no, you had a whole floor on 6th Avenue. Not huge, but I paid, the most I paid was $125 a month. Then I moved to 22nd Street, 2500, beautiful skylights. Actually, it appears in some photograph done by my Cuban friend Juan Lee, and it was only $250 a month. Today, something like that was with 20,000.
Were you ever a hippie?
Yeah.
Eh?
No. Yeah. No, I was very active in terms of just doing my art. It was important for me to.
Yeah, but how did you make a living?
Well, sometimes I work as a waiter. Sometimes I did some carpet, but I didn't want to work for somebody full time. I wanted to be free.
I love the three-dimensionality of this painting.
Yeah, you know that.
And it's also kind of very spatial, like it is. No, it's the next one.
You know the title?
No, not that one. The other one, which
Princesa del Caribe.
that one. This
Yeah.
is it. And it seems to be like these two door entrances seem to be floating in space. It's a
Yes.
very sort of eerie painting. It's sort of like a gateway to somewhere in outer space. Am I wrong?
Also, there is moving about dancing. At the time that I was doing, finally, Latin American, well, Caribbean music became very popular. Salsa.
Do you think this is about dancing?
Yes.
Huh, interesting. I would never have thought about dancing.
Yeah,
I
but
would have
also,
thought of gateways. Well, I mean, they're not embracing each other. They're not touching each other.
yes. And some of
I
the
don't see
dance,
the bodies.
yeah, some of the dancing also influenced by Africans.
Influenced by what?
Africans.
Africa?
Africans, yeah.
What's influenced by Africa? Everything.
Well, the music too.
Yeah, of course. All the music of the Caribbean and Latin American music has a great deal of African origin. Sure.
Yeah.
No doubt. But I don't see that in this painting at all.
Well,
Sorry.
and you know how tall it is?
I don't know what?
How tall? It's big. It's 96 inches tall.
Wow. Yeah, I saw that on the list that that I got sent by the American Society. They're all pretty tall.
Yes.
This one is too.
Yes. Also, the Smithsonian bought 3 from that series.
So the color scheme, what the colors that you choose, where does that come from?
The college that I chose. Well,
Is that an intuitive thing or?
actually, you probably know Carmen Cicero.
Carmen who?
Cicero.
Wisa?
Cicero.
Fisher?
Cicero.
I don't understand.
Oh,
Carmen
because
Cicero.
Carmen Cicero.
Ah, okay.
Who doesn't know him?
Yeah, when I went to the new school, he was doing geometric art, and we were still friends, even though he's 92 years old. And we got really good friends. I used to go to the studio, we used to have lunch together, and still we follow each other.
And so what is that, how does that relate to your choice of the colors?
Well, one of the things, when I found teachers that were good, I spent most of my time talking with them. And that's my way of learning.
Right, but how did you get to, there's certain preferential colors in these abstract minimalist works.
Well, there are 2 things.
Orange, for instance.
First of all, I'm a natural colorist because I grew up in a country where color exists, the light is good. Also because I study textile design, I also had to study the science of color. So I combine the 2 things. And now,
Science of color.
yes.
But I mean, when you decide on a particular color in a particular painting, all of that comes into there, or is there a certain level of intuition that you say this has got to be orange?
At one point, I don't think about it. I just follow my intuition because I knew so much about color. Oh,
That's what I imagine. I imagine you can't just sit in front of an abstract painting and start thinking about all the color theory in the world.
yes.
That's not possible.
But also color.
That brings the question, that brings in, there's a question to say, how do you start a painting?
Well, first of all, my great uncle is he's dead, but one of the most famous Dominican artists. So it is in my DNA. I've been doing art since my childhood.
Yeah, but my question is, how do you start a painting?
I started painting.
Yeah, what brings you to start a painting?
Doing everything myself. I used to buy canvas. I used to prime it and then paint. And very soon I started working large.
But I mean, do you have an idea when you start painting, or does it come from previous paintings? Is there a sequential, or is it like, I got to do this line here and that line there, and let's see where it goes?
Well, sometimes it comes from books
I mean,
I
other
read.
people talk about, this fear of standing in front of an empty page or standing in front of an empty canvas.
Well, sometimes it's about history. Some of the books I read, some of the history, especially in the Caribbean and in America, and also politics.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So there's some ideas floating in your head related to whatever you were reading at the time, or whatever you were looking at the time.
Yes.
Some people talk about their work saying that they never start something new. It's always a continuation of the other work prior.
Also,
and then other people say, I always start fresh. I turn everything around that I've done and I start fresh.
for both artists, they continue working in the same style, not that many change. And you know what I found really moving, Rothko was also an influence in my art because of the emotions that Rothko put into his work. But if you look at all his art, the last paintings were totally black, and then he committed suicide.
Roscoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say it was provoked by Marlboro Gallery supplying him with the wrong drugs and too much alcohol.
So he got color.
Big scandal.
He got color out of his painting, and then he killed himself too.
He was an amazing colorist.
Yeah. Also, at the time, so many artists were doing drugs and drinking. That generation, it was.
You mean in the 80s?
Yeah. No, in the 50s also.
The 60s, not many visual artists. It kind of started with Joseph Kassuth and SVA. That whole generation became totally cokeheads.
Yeah.
Before that, the drugs was more in the music world.
Yes. But
and they moved into the visual arts, and then AIDS came, and then that was the end of that.
Yeah, no, but for example, Jackson Pollock always drunk.
Yeah, well, that was the AppX. They all went to that cafe. What was it called? And they all got drunk every night.
Yeah.
The Kooning was an alcoholic too.
The place, University Place. I used to go there too.
No, University Place was much later. It was prior. It was in a cafe in the West Village where they all met, the AppX artists.
And also, I used to go a lot to Kansas City.
But alcohol, you can consider it a drug, but when I talk about the drugs that artists used, it started actually with, of course, marijuana was very common, but then it moved to cocaine, and unfortunately, some of the people got hooked on heroin and died. But for the most part, people stopped doing cocaine when AIDS happened, because it was also a problem of contagiousness. If you shared like a straw or something like that. So there was a scare. All of a sudden was a scare. And everybody became very healthy and started playing pool instead of doing drugs. But they always continued working as artists, despite everything.
No, but if you're doing...
We have examples of, you know, William Burroughs and people like that continue to do drugs until the bitter end. So,
but if you do geometric art, you have to be sober, physically and mentally. You cannot be
I can
drunk.
imagine, otherwise it would become ab-ex.
Yeah,
It would become drip painting or whatever. It
right.
wouldn't remain very rigorous.
Yeah,
See.
but also...
So it is kind of is this a gladiator or what is he doing, that man?
The
one of your painting?
Right.
Oh, I did a series about baseball, Dominican baseball. Because
This is a baseball. Oh, okay.
yes, not only that, you know, there was a lot of discrimination at the beginning of baseball, and they didn't allow the black people to play. Until Jackie Robinson broke that, and also once they came in, the black and the Latinos, they were underpaid, even if they were better than the white players. But this guy here, Hispanics were Dominicans, and when he signed with the Yankees, he got the highest salary in baseball, and that's why I painted a gold background.
So, who were your favorite baseball players aside from this one?
Well, Juan Marichal, he was a pitcher in San Francisco. He was Dominican. He was a great pitcher. I done 2 paintings about him. Juan Marichal.
But who were your favorite players?
Well, now I'm not watching
baseball players.
Not watching too much baseball now because television. I don't care much about television today. I usually watch the news, but television is so crazy today. It's a waste of time.
But the sports fans are still huddling around a TV set. Boxers.
No, you have to pay for that now. You have to.
Of course you have to pay. It's all cable. Yeah.
Yes.
Sports channels. Right.
Yeah.
So is this the only sport painting you did?
No, I did it's at the Noah Museum. I did a whole thing about baseball. I did different installations. I made a glass pot. I did a series of bricks. The first on the Dominican that joined Major League Baseball, and I call them paving the way. What is amazing to me is the Dominican Republic is such a small country. It has some of the best baseball players in the world.
Yeah, actually, so does Cuba.
Yeah.
It seems to be a Caribbean thing.
Yes. But Cubans are going...
I was going to ask you if you were watching, if you had some recent players and you're watching some baseball players. What's the status of the Japanese in that game? But I guess we don't know because neither you nor I are fans of sports cable channels. I don't watch them either.
No, I haven't watched it, but some of the Japanese are very good players too.
I used to watch Wimbledon. Used to watch I'm not particularly interested in sports that involve people running behind a ball, pushing a ball, throwing a ball, catching a ball. I'm more interested in sports like, skiing, individual sports that you need a lot of training for, like skiing and ice skating and swimming, diving, those
Yeah.
kind of sports. But I do enjoy, one of the games that I like where a ball is involved is the tennis playing, the Wimbledon
Well,
and Forest Hills. Have
I
you
used
done
to play
anything
tennis.
with tennis?
I used to play tennis, and I live so close to the tennis center here in Flushing.
You live in Flushing, yeah, in Forest Hills, no?
I They don't play that much in Forest Hill professionally.
Do you still play?
No, I
No,
miss playing.
neither do I. I used to play also.
Oh, yeah,
Now we play with our gadgets, with our artwork, with our
I
writing.
went to Tokyo twice. I did an exhibition in Tokyo about the tsunami they had. That were like 20,000 people were killed, and that was very moving because also at the beginning, even today, I deal with art about trauma. There's so much trauma in life, and art makes you feel good.
Yeah, that's true. It does make people feel better. It
Yes,
heals. There's a
yes.
healing aspect to it. Yeah. What are we looking at above in the slide?
Well,
Can you describe that?
I I made a lot of flowers in some of the paintings because Christopher Columbus always called it paradise. And even today, in order to promote tourism, they called our places paradise. And I use the flowers as part of paradise, but also as a witness to corruption. They look like eyes sometimes, and they like looking at them. But also, what is important to me is paintings should look beautiful too.
Yeah, I agree. There's a question from the audience for you, Freddy.
Oh, okay.
It says, can you delve a bit into your Cimarrón series and your literary influences like Cortázar? I think you've already delved a lot into the literary, but the Cimarrón would be a good thing to expand on. And if you feel like you want to expand on the literary, go ahead. And this comes from somebody who goes by Pau Franciscini.
Well, the cimarrón,
It's a question for you.
the cimarrón ran away in pursuit of freedom, something that I had done in my life, also pursuing freedom. And Julio Cortázar, one of my favorite books is Libro de Manuel, because it's very political.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He wants you to delve a little bit more into that series.
Oh, well, as I told you before, I read the book by Miguel Barnett, The Cuban
But maybe he wasn't listening at that point, so it'd be good to repeat it.
Yeah, Miguel Barnett. He wrote a book, Biografía de un cimarrón. And the first one I made, Atrapado en Pulso, is the legs in the red area that I painted. And the other thing is, I use collages, and some of the collages had to do with discrimination. Some of the collages included the articles in the New York Times, the advertising of the galleries, and at the time, that's what they were reviewing. They pay for the advertising. And the other thing I included, the cardinal, the calendar from MoMA.
Yeah. There's another question from the audience, and it's, Freddy, how did baseball become so popular in the Dominican Republic?
Well,
by the way, I love the Cimarrón series. They're beautiful.
Yes. One of the things about Dominican Republic, you can play baseball all year round, anytime, because of the weather. And also, what is amazing is the Dominican Republic is a very poor country. And then people always playing. They made their own gloves, they made their own balls, their own bats, no uniform, no shoes. And then once the baseball players joined Major League Baseball and they started making a lot of money, everybody got excited about becoming a baseball player. I made some, what I call portraits of some of the best players. It's no portrait of how they look. It's how what they accomplish, how talented they are, how good they are, and how much they pay. It's unbelievable, the millions of dollars that they make. One of the people that they make, Big Papi.
It's just like a demonstration of how resourceful people can be, even in the most dire circumstances of having absolutely no money. They invented the whole, their whatever they needed, the gloves and the balls, etc. themselves. I mean, it's very similar in the lower working class neighborhoods of Mexico, but it's not as well known because it's a huge country to start with. It's 5 times the size of France, so Dominican Republic is small, and so the desire to be, to play baseball, to have a sport in those neighborhoods is just as strong as people middle class and higher. And that's what's so remarkable. It just shows you the stamina and the energy and the spirit behind what it means for those kids to be involved in a game, competing with each other, without hating each other, but just getting along, having a game to play between each other.
And now they sign them up when they're very young, and they train them to join Major League. And sometimes they pay like $100,000 just to sign, and they are teenagers. And also, what I was very surprised, in Boston, they named a street after a Dominican player, David Ortiz, Big Papi. And
wow.
I made 2 paintings, and one of them is at the Smithsonian Portrait Gallery.
Can you lastly, because we're going to go off air soon, just give a comment on the other circular painting above us with the orange red stripe in the middle?
Well, again, this had to do with colonization, because I used a tondo instead of using round paintings for that. Also, the background is earth, how they penetrated earth. And the butterflies is part of the paradise.
Well, it looks rather optimistic on the screen. I'm sure that those, very pertinent thoughts behind it give the painting an extra charge when you look at it in person, but unfortunately I haven't been able to see your show at Hutchinson Modern. When I return, I will certainly, that's one of the first stops I'll make.
Yeah.
And it's been a real pleasure seeing you, being with you, and functioning as two talking heads here, as though we are like important television people.
You saw my show in the Bronx, a geometric division in the Bronx. You came to.
I hope you had fun, Freddy, talking.
Yeah, no, it was good to see you.
Thank you, Freddy.
Yeah, thank you too for talking.
Para la próxima. Bye.
Bye bye. Espero
Bye.
en Nueva York.